Good morning, everybody. Today our lecture will be about quantitative non-experimental designs. Non-experimental designs or studies. These studies are also called observational because the study involves making observations rather than intervention. In this type of quantitative design, the researcher is passive in contrast to experimental designs. Why non-experimental studies? We need non-experimental studies because in certain situations, studies cannot be done with experimental or quasi-experimental designs. And this is because independent variable cannot be manipulated, or it is unethical to manipulate independent variables. For example, when studying the effect of widowhood on physical health, we cannot manipulate widowhood as people lose their spouses by a process that is neither random nor subject to control. So, what do? We take two groups, widows and non-widows, as they naturally occur and compare their physical health. What are the types of non-experimental studies? They include correlational studies, whether it is retrospective and prospective types. The second group in non-experimental studies is descriptive studies, and this includes cross-sectional and longitudinal types. Correlational studies. The advantage of this is that many relationships could be discovered in a short time compared to interventional or experimental designs which need long time. The disadvantage is the inability to reveal causal relationship and the susceptibility to faulty interpretations. In correlation studies, independent variable is not controlled, indicating that the research has been conducted after variation in the independent variable has occurred. And this is called ex post facto research, or after the fact. What is the purpose of correlation research? Like experimental research, to study relationship among variables, but we do not infer causal relationship in correlation studies. Correlation studies fall into two groups, retrospective and prospective. The retrospective. In a retrospective design, a phenomena observed in the present is linked to phenomena occurring in the past. The researcher focuses on a presently occurring outcome and then tries to ascertain antecedent exposure that have caused it. An example, if we are studying the relationship between smoking and lung cancer, we take two groups, lung cancer patient and people without lung cancer, and these actually are the outcome groups. Then we dig into the history and see the history of smoking in the two groups. After that, we do our statistical analysis. Prospective studies. Prospective designs start with exposure and then go forward to the outcome, the opposite of the retrospective design. Prospective are costly than retrospective studies, but are stronger. Example, prospective lung cancer study start with a sample of smokers and non-smokers, and later compare the two groups in terms of lung cancer incidence. Another example for studying the lung cancer, but this time is with prospective design. we start with people with current smoking status and another group who are non-smoking, 2,000 in each group. After 20 years, we collect data about these two groups regarding the development of lung cancer. And then we do our statistical analysis. Now we move to the descriptive studies. Descriptive studies. The purpose of descriptive studies is to observe, describe, then document a phenomenon. For example, an investigator may wish to determine the percentages of teenage mothers who receive adequate prenatal care. Sometimes a report refers to the study design as descriptive correlation, meaning that researchers were interested in describing relationship among variables without seeking to establish causal connections. Example of a descriptive study. Researchers might be interested in describing the relationship between fatigue and psychological distress in HIV patients. Because the intent in this situation is not specifically to explain or to understand the underlying causes of the variable of interest, a non-experimental design is appropriate. Descriptive studies fall into two types, cross-sectional and longitudinal. Cross-sectional designs involve the collection of data at one point in time or multiple times in a short time period, such as 2 hours and 4 hours post-operatively. All phenomena or variables under study are captured during one data collection. Note: retrospective studies are almost always cross-sectional. Cross-sectional design is weaker than longitudinal studies. For example, if studying changes in children's health promotion activities between age 7 and 10 years. One way to investigate this would be to interview the same children at age of 7 and then 3 years later at the age of 10. A longitudinal design. Or we could use a cross-sectional design by interviewing different children aged 7 and 10 at one point in time and then comparing their responses. If 10 years old engaged in more health promotion activities than 7 years old, it might be inferred that children become more conscious for making good health choices as they age. Longitudinal designs. Studies that collect data more than twice over an extended period use longitudinal designs. Longitudinal designs are useful for examining changes over time and for ascertaining the temporal sequencing of phenomena. 3 types of longitudinal studies deserve special mention, and these are trends, panel, and follow-up studies. Trend study design. A trend study samples different groups of people at different points in time for the same population. For example, before an election, a sample of adults is drawn. A year later, a different sample drawn from the same population shows a change. In trend studies, researchers can examine patterns of change and make prediction about future directions. Panel study designs. In panel studies, the same people provide data at 2 or more points in time. Panel refers to the same sample of people in the study. Panel studies yield more information than trend studies because researchers can identify individuals who did and did not change. Then explore characteristics that differentiate the two groups. What are the disadvantages of panel studies? They are difficult and expensive to manage. Loss of participant over time, or what we know as attrition. Follow-up studies are undertaken to determine the subsequent status of subject with a specific condition or who receive specific intervention. For example, patients who have received smoking intervention may be followed up to ascertain its long-term effect. To take a non-experimental example, samples of premature infants may be followed up to assess their later perceptual and motor development. Thank you very much for following, and your questions and comments are highly valuable.